Oops, do we have noise here? Let me turn up. Maybe a little bit. All right. Oh, my battery doesn't die. I've just unplugged my power, so it's possible. All right, welcome. This is day 4 on this 4X portrait of 4 people. Let's get official and say this is Daily Art Adventure number 955, Late Glazes on Portraits by me. I can't believe August is more than half over already. Wow. Let me turn down some of the echo around here. Hello, gang. Thanks for joining me. Hello, Uncle. Yeah, I worked a little bit on it since you guys saw me yesterday. All right. Let me point at my photo reference. This is a montage, a composite that I put together in Photoshop from a number of candid photographs, and none of them were very good, especially this one. In this one, the woman is hugging her granddaughter, and this whole half of her face was missing. I had to reconstruct that, but enough of that. The boy did not really have a toy train in his hand, but he does here. He had something else in his hand that I can't remember. Anyway, so I have, since yesterday, I did a bunch of double checking. I made some prints. I forget which one of these now is. I made several. I think it's this one. Before I got one that was the right size, and did a bunch of checking. All right, so I'm down to, I'm a little dismayed at how long it's taking me to do these 4 portraits, but better take a long time and get it right than get in a hurry and do it wrong. One of the challenges about the photographs is, of course, typical that they're not very high quality. This woman is not too bad, somewhat blown out, washed out in the whites. This woman is, as you can see, her face is very flat. Again, that's just because it was not a high quality photograph. So I'm quite a bit left to my own devices when it comes to achieving a pleasant and believable flesh tone and so forth. So I'm going to glaze. Again, this is just one way to do portraits. By no means am I suggesting it's the only way. This is just one way, one of my ways of doing portraits. At the moment, I'm doing everything here, of course, is dry because I did it all yesterday. This will be a short broadcast. My wife and I are jumping in the car very shortly. I hope you're noticing that all of those faces are now, should seem to you like a little bit too dark. That would be good. That would be appropriate. They are indeed. They're too dark. And the color I used, not that it matters, but the color was oxide red with a little bit of my color killer, which is, of course, raw umber. So because they are now a little bit too dark, that means I can do one of my favorite tricks, which is lifting out. Let's start with the woman here on the far left. I think yeah, good. That my tape, of course, now won't stick to my painting, but I can tape it up there. Let me turn off the air conditioning. Close the air conditioning. Vent. There we go. All right, so now I'm going to lift out with a rag. If it doesn't come off easily enough, if I don't achieve the lightening effect that I want, then I would dip the corner of this, of course, in Gamsol. But it seems to be working, seems to be coming off fine. So I'm just painting with a rag, with my finger stuck in a rag. And I'm very much looking at the values in the photograph. I think part of the reason I chose to do this particular portrait in this technique is, in fact, because the photographs were not real high quality. And for me, this particular technique entails more improvisation or intuitive painting, because I'm not, as you can tell, I'm not slavishly copying the photograph because I don't have a good photograph. Years ago, I used to teach a class, or I taught it a couple times. One time at Art of the Carolinas, I taught, I think it was called 6 techniques, although I may have reduced it to 5. 6 techniques for achieving killer flesh tones. And this was one of the techniques, one of the 6. And I called this one the Rembrandt approach, because it was brown underpainting and color on top. Right now, however, by using a rag and lifting out paint, lifting paint off the canvas, this technique could just as easily be attributed to Leonardo da Vinci. It's likely, I'm not an expert on this, but it's likely that he used some lifting out technique on his rendering, on his painting, rendering, on his painting of Mona Lisa. Let's see, what do I want next? All right. The effect that is achieved by lifting out is soft edges. Now, the fact that I'm using definitely transparent color also gives me a richness of color. I don't know if it's possible for you to compare this woman out to the way she looked a few minutes ago. But she looks better. She looks warmer. I'm not done, but I'm closing in on done. By the way, let me just mention again, because I am sticking my finger in this, somewhat dirty rag, I'm going to be fairly careful to use some kind of wipe. This is Studio Wipes from Jerry's Artorama, to keep my hands fairly free of painty stuff. Some people paint with gloves, good for them. I just have never been able to get comfortable wearing latex gloves when I paint. So I maybe should, but I just don't like it. All right. Now, how many of you suppose that when somebody looks at this painting, they will recognize that this woman, the light's coming from the right, and this woman, the light's coming from the left? Okay, that's our little secret, okay? My guess is that virtually nobody will ever notice that. Maybe one of my fellow painters, a fellow painting student, if I took this painting to my critique group, maybe I would say, hey, wait a minute, where's your light coming from? I might be kidding myself, but I feel like I can get away with it simply because this woman is back further. So, that's my excuse. That's my story. I'm sticking with it. I really don't have much choice. That's the photographs that I received from the client, and I'm just making it work. Not ideal by any means, but again, I doubt that anybody will ever notice except you and me. That's only because you're watching this video. This lady's eyes, both of them, need some work. But I'm not doing details right now. I'm just doing flesh tone. Let me go back to my brief conversation about the 6 techniques that I, in the years past, have taught. 6 techniques for achieving flesh tone. I'm not going to go over all of them, but I'll give you a summary statement. One of my favorite ways, and one thing that was common in I think 5 of those 6, was that they all entailed, to some degree, they entailed this glazing. And I think that painting flesh tones with glazing is one of the most effective ways to achieve a realistic flesh tone. Now, just a quick nod, that's in a sense the very opposite of say Mark Carter. Again, that's Carder with a D. Mark Carter's approach is quite the opposite of that. He does opaque painting, color matching, and there's no, as far as I know, there's no glazing at all. Now, I may be wrong about that, but I believe that's the case. And he does exquisite color matching in his flesh tones, and I respect, admire, and use that technique sometimes. That picture is too big, isn't it? Let's see if I've got a small one here somewhere. Nope, I don't. So we'll just use it. Now, as far as just painting goes, I am the happiest with the look. This now it's got a glaze over it right now, but I'm quite happy. I hope I can retain the energy in this particular face. I have more details to do on all of these women. The likenesses are down, if you will. Got that part down. But not all the values. Some of the creases are too dark. Some of the highlights aren't high enough, and so forth. So I have more work to do, but I really hope, in particular on this face, that I cannot lose the. There's an erroneous mark right there. That's not supposed to be there. I hope I cannot lose that's a nice painterly, in my opinion, loose, nice texture, interesting marks. I just have to correct the color, and I'm certainly hoping I can do that. All right, let's look at this little guy now. It's going to be harder to hang up a reference of him. Let me pull up a longer piece of tape, steel tape from all these other. There we go. Where there's a will, there's a way, kind of thing, right? All of my faces at this stage of the painting process are a little bit dark. All of them, especially this guy. So, and that's fine with me. That means some of the last, you start with dark, finish with light, right? Dark's first, light's last. That's pretty much a universal art professorism that I adhere to quite strongly. So for me to say they all need to be lightened is that's an easy fix. The reason, in my opinion, that glazing is such a good way to do flesh tones is because that's why skin looks the way it does to us, is because our skin is translucent. The color of every person that you look at, they have that color because you're looking through multiple layers. Oops, I almost missed you on that, didn't I? We're looking through multiple layers of skin that creates the finished color that we see. So in a way, to paint in the same way that we see is often a good idea. All right. Again, this broadcast is not going to be very long. But let me show you where I'm going to go from here. Mostly she needs lightening, but before I start doing highlights, I want to get some of her creases and dark areas corrected. And in her case, I think maybe in all of them, the creases the faces that I have here are actually too contrasty. The creases are too dark. So again, not too, like, let's take for instance the crease above her eye right here. See, it's not black, but it's too black. So I'm mixing up a dull dark red so that I can come in here and actually lighten that crease somewhat. Not light enough. I'm painting very much in, same thing with the edge of her nose. See that dark line? In fact, that looks like I might be able to see a little pencil, black pencil coming through, which is not pleasant. In this case, I mentioned earlier, I am not obligated for some technical reason to cover up all the pencil marks. I'm not obligated to cover them all up. But same, even more so over here, this edge of her nostril, that is definitely black pencil. But I am going to cover them up if I find them offensive, if I find them unpleasant. I'm mixing up now a darker version of that. Yesterday I gave you a recipe for red black or black red. I guess red black would be more appropriate. So that's the color that's on my brush right now, is what I call red black. This color on this brush is more like a brownish red. What's the word I'm looking for? Like almost like a red Conte Grand color. Oh, and I'm sorry, I started to say a minute ago, I'm very definitely painting in translucent. Again, I am not obligated to cover up say any of these dark marks I mentioned a minute ago. They're too dark. I think one of the consistent mistakes that I see being made by early journey painters, maybe I am an early journey painter when it comes to portraits, but one of the mistakes I see in others' paintings is some plastering. I don't know, let me hesitate on that. Because one of the other problems I see in early journey painters, the paint's too thin or the paint's too thick. Either one is a mistake. So never mind. The point I was trying to make, though, in my covering up, like I'm doing right now, of covering up of lines that are too dark, I'm not plastering over them. Does that make sense? Now this is my dark color, my black red that's on this brush. So I'm in fact increasing. Do you see that crease right there? Increasing that crease. That's a good bad turn of phrase. And she needs the same dark crease right here. Tell you what, I'm going to put, I think she probably needs more, again, a little bit more darkening effect here and there, but I'm going to go ahead again because I think this broadcast is going to be pretty short. And let me say hi to Michael and Travis. You're very kind, Travis. I'm not sure my discipline is astounding, but thank you, you're very kind. And Araya from the bushes. I love it. Thank you for saying, thank you for joining us again. What fun, from the bushes of Africa. All right, because this broadcast is probably going to be short, I want to proceed to some light highlights now. I mean, you could, this is just, I don't want to get this light, but I do want to get lighter than it is. So I've been practicing my normal approach whenever you're painting a busy, variegated subject matter, and a face is certainly that. Mid-tone over the whole thing, dark details, light details. So in this case, my mid-tone was that glaze. Then I did some dark details, what you saw a minute ago, and now I'm going to do light highlights. Now, I love what, again, I've talked a lot in the last couple of days about Mark Carder. That's because he's a big dog portrait painter, very good teacher, one of my favorite online painting artist teachers. He's very generous with his information. And one of the things that he emphasizes very rightly is he tries to get his students to stop blending when they're doing portraits in particular. Stop blending their paints. Don't achieve roundness by going scrubby, 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 or brushy, brushy, brushy. Instead, achieve roundness by mixing a range of paints and putting them in the right place. What he's getting at, in my language there, one of the things he's getting at is what I call the essence of good painting is making interesting marks. And brushy, 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 blendy, blendy is not, those are not good marks. In a word, those are not good marks. Much better to actually see the brush strokes that have been applied to the canvas to achieve the finished effect. So I'm trying to do that right now. I'm trying to follow his good advice and put the paint down and leave it. I'm painting pretty thin right now, but still, in other words, it's translucent stuff that's on my brush, right? Does that make sense to you? That register? Or I could, not, let me say that again. It's opaque paint, but there's such a small amount of paint on the brush that the effect is it's being applied in a very translucent manner. That is, we can see through the brush strokes so that we can see what's underneath. If you watch me often, you've heard me say you get dark with transparent colors. The one exception being when you're doing portraits, often dark transparent are too stark for a portrait. But let me finish the expression. You get dark with transparent colors, light with opaque, and then there's a third phrase that I don't usually say. I have it written down somewhere in one of my books that isn't published. But the magic is very often in the translucent. The real magic, and that's where me and a traditional 20th century painter, and by that I mean most traditional 20th century painters paint quite opaquely, and I paint a lot of transparent. But we agree on the importance of translucent. And much of the real magic in a painting actually rests in the, or resides in the translucent mark. So it's opaque paint, but applied so thinly that we can see what's underneath. So when you look at the painting, you're actually seeing layers of color. And there are many traditional 20th century painters who indeed do paint. I think like of a Richard Schmid, who is, for all practical purposes, an opaque painter, except that he and I would agree on the value of in between opaque and transparent, which is translucent. So three cheers for translucent paint. All right, I'm gonna, without cleaning these brushes, so I had a dull flesh color on them, light, pale, but not very high chroma. And I just picked up some added some titanium white to them, so it's not very clean because I didn't clean my brushes. Is the point I'm trying to make. It's a I want to make that point that I'm painting her teeth now, and I am most certainly not using white paint, right? That would be quite the disaster. In fact, if I hit it just right, I will want to come back and lighten her teeth just a little bit more. I'm going to leave that for now, though. She needs highlight on her bottom lip. By the way, I am very much enjoying doing portraits this size. As some of you know, my wedding painting, in fact, my last wedding painting that I did, I don't know if you saw it, I actually put a penny down on the painting before I delivered it, took a picture, posted that on several places in social media, just to either brag or complain. But the portraits were actually smaller than a penny, about the size of this woman's nose. And when you do portraits that size, you can't, at least I can't paint very loosely because the thing's so tiny. So I am very much enjoying here painting in what I would call a more legit style, or painterly style, or John Singer Sargent-ish style. And doing quite a bit of painting with my left hand for two reasons. One is I like the discipline of just forcing myself, again, pushing all the time to paint with my non-dominant hand. But I'm really encouraged in that pursuit here these days because my right shoulder has developed quite the soreness. So it really behooves me. Do you like that word? Behooves me. Behooves me to paint with my left hand. Give my right shoulder break. A little bit of palette knife right here on her glasses. A little bit more palette knife right here on her glasses. That might be okay. Let me talk a little bit more about, unless you're doing a portrait the size of a penny, in which case I'm going to hoist the white flag of surrender and say, okay, when I'm doing a portrait the size of a penny or even the size of a quarter, all of my rules for good painting go out the window. That's what I surrender. But when doing a portrait this size, I'm trying to follow my conventional rules of painting, which is one of the most important is that the essence of good painting is making interesting marks, right? If you watch me often, you've heard me say that many times. It's one of my most oft stated mantras, if you will. Again, the essence, the sine qua non, without which nothing, the essence of good painting is interesting marks. The interestingness, if you let me invent words, the interestingness of the mark is more important, or trumps, if you will, using a card analogy, trumps realism. Now, as you can tell, this is a fairly realistic painting, right? You can tell not only that it's a woman in a portrait, but you can tell it's this woman, right? So, and I've gone to quite considerable lengths to make it a realistic painting. So please hear this in context. But the nature of the marks themselves, just the very abstract marks that I'm making, trumps the realism, is more important than realism, or similitude is a word that I often use. And I want to say a little bit more about that. You hear me say that, so far you hear me say that all the time. The essence of good painting is making interesting marks. Let me go a little bit further, and I've said this as well, but I just want to say it again. So, what doth an interesting mark make? What is an interesting mark? Now, that is a good question, and in my opinion, a lifelong pursuit. I will never, as long as I'm able to keep painting, I will never finish my quest for, there was some blending right there, cheating. I will never finish my quest for the interesting mark, right? So it's a lifelong pursuit. It's much more difficult than realism. Realism is simply, if it looks like the thing, you got it, right? Realism is much easier than abstract realism, which is what I call, got that from David Lafell, another big dog painter, portrait painter, abstract realism, which means, again, that the marks themselves are paramount, are more important than the realism, even though, I hope you can see, the realism is quite important to me, especially when doing portraits, right? But the marks, all right. So now I told you I was going to try to take that one step further. What doth an interesting mark make? What makes a mark interesting? And again, lifelong pursuits. I want to give you one piece, and that is, it'll be surprising and counterintuitive to any of you who are early journey painters. Very often, the best marks that your brush will make, right? Assuming you're using a brush, putting paint on the canvas with a brush. Whoops, there's my wife calling me. I'm gonna have to interrupt this broadcast in a minute. All right, very often the best, most interesting marks that you will make are the ones that you do not make on purpose. All right, gang, she's calling me back, which means it's urgent. So sorry, I'm gonna have to interrupt this broadcast for just a minute, talk to my wife. I'll be right back. Don't go away. Thanks. All right, are we back? I think we are. We will be in a moment. There we go. Hello, gang. Thank you for hanging in there. Sorry about that interruption. My wife and I are leaving very shortly. I'm debating whether to say anything about this or not, but now that I've said that much. Let me finish, though, about interesting marks. Okay, if you will hold your brushes, I'm going to be blunt and offensive, in the correct manner. Not this, in my opinion, not even this. This is, let me see. Okay, this is how a lot of excellent painters paint, and that's a whole lot better than this. Tongue painting, right? So not that, unless you're doing a portrait the size of a penny. Do you understand? That's my excuse. I'm sticking with it. If you will hold your brushes in a proper manner, which for me means anything but this, usually like this, when you hold your brush loosely, then your hand wiggles and jiggles accidentally. You don't have to try to make it wiggle and jiggle. It just wiggles and jiggles because you have a pulse, and because there's blood flowing through your muscles in a pulse, and so your muscles cannot hold perfectly still. So your brush will wiggle and jiggle and do things. And this is very important for me to say, because many of you early journey painters, you are in fact angry. You get angry often at your hand because it wiggles and jiggles and won't hold still. And you think if you were a good artist, like maybe you might say like Dan Nelson or something, then I bet my hand would hold still. And that is exactly the very opposite. Many times the very best marks that your hand will make, the very best marks that you'll put on your canvas, are the ones that you don't intend, because you allow the brush to be alive, living, not alive, but an extension of your living hand and appendages. All right, I'm gonna, well, let me hang on. I only have a few minutes. Let's do a little bit with our eyes. And I might, after saying all that, I might resort to a tiny bit of tongue painting. Tiny bit, to get the whites of her eyes. Please notice, first of all, that the whites of her eyes are most certainly not going to be white. Okay, so do you know that's a real common mistake? They're basically a pale tan color, slight but less, a little bit more blue in them, a little more neutral. Here I am. So this is me cheating, right? This is me tongue painting, I call it most of the time. Every rule can be broken, including that one. You just need to know when and why to break it. I'm going to do a little bit of a reflection. This woman has remarkably pale eyes for a black woman. An African American, if you prefer. She has a hazel brown, I would say. Interesting. That I may come back and try to reflect that reality in her eyes later on, but I won't have time to do that today. I'm just about done. All right, so here, let me, it's a rare opportunity. So we are leaving today to go down, drive to about 2 hours, because tomorrow morning we have a memorial service for our daughter who died 2 weeks ago. Sorry, I don't really want to shock you. Did he just say what I think he said? Yes, I did. Our 37-year-old daughter, dear daughter, Melody, passed away 2 weeks ago. And I hesitate to say this because I don't want, I mean, no, you're more than welcome to say whatever you want to say. Like, oh, no, I'm so sorry. And that's appropriate, but don't feel like you have to, okay? Don't feel like you have to, that's all right. It's been coming for a very long time. She died of Huntington's disease. We adopted Melody and her brother when she was 10 and her brother was 5. So she's been part of our family since she was 10 years old, 27 years ago. And starting about 12 or 15 years ago, we began to see the symptoms of this disease. So we know we've known it's coming for a long, long time. For the last year, she's been trying really hard to take herself out of this life and into the next one. She has a very strong faith, which we do as well. So we feel more, her husband, her amazing husband, married her 4 years ago in spite of the fact that he knew she was dying. Pretty amazing. And, you know, for those of you who don't share our faith, my heart goes out to you. Because now's the time. And if you want to know the reason for the faith that's in me, I'd be glad to share that anytime. It's not based on pure intellect, but it is supported by the intellect, contrary to the way the prevailing viewpoint in our culture these days. So anyway, we're going through interesting times in our life these days. And tomorrow we're going to have a celebration of Melody's life. If you want to pray for anybody, pray for her dear, dear, dear husband. He was pretty broken up. He knew it was coming. And thank you, Anthony. You're sweet. Appreciate that. Again, I feel free to say nice things. I don't want to, but don't feel like you need to. Okay, and again, it's been a long journey, and we've known it's been coming for a long time. We are relieved for her. I'm sure many of you can relate to that when you've lost typically parents or grandparents, right, after a long illness. You know that feeling. We're happy for her. There's no question in our mind she's in a better place, and there's no question in our mind we're going to see her again. And we're finding that really, really, really does make a difference. And again, forgive me for sounding like an evangelist here on my painting broadcast, but that just happens sometimes, doesn't it? Because I broadcast, except for the last couple of weeks, I broadcast nearly every day. So that means by definition, you're going to be a little part of our life. So there you go. There's a part of our life. All right, I'm fairly happy with the progress that I've made on this woman's face. I just need to do more of it. There's something that, well, I've got a dark line under her. Let me see if I can fix that. If I'm not downstairs all packed, ready to go when my wife gets home in 10 minutes, my name is Mud. So I better get going pretty soon. That's why she called me. You know that. You know, I am at such and such a gas station, and I'll be right home after that. So I have a pretty good idea how many minutes I have. Let me zoom in for just a minute, let you guys see a little bit up closer. I'm not entirely happy. I love her hair, by the way. Not entirely happy with this. It's too contrasty. One of the most common mistakes to make. The creases down here, she looks like a ventriloquist dummy, even though in reality they are quite dark, but I've got them a little bit too. Do you see that? Can you compare this crease, even though it's quite dark, to that one? That one's darker. All right, so that's a fixer-upper. I mentioned earlier that, forgive the shaking, at the moment this needs some lightening, some highlights, and the eyes aren't finished at all. But at the moment, that's in my opinion, that's a nice painting. And what I mean by that is this whole subject I've been talking about interesting marks or pleasant marks. That has another word for it that has very good texture, nice brush strokes, nice texture. I don't use the term loose anymore. That's pretty, most art professor, teacher people talk about loose brush strokes. And in the last year or so, I've discovered that, wait a minute, that does not communicate the right thing to early journey painters, because loose sounds like sloppy, careless, inaccurate drawing. And as you can see, the goal here is most certainly not inaccurate drawing. So I try not to use the word loose anymore. Interesting, energetic, good energy. And a little while ago, I was talking about, what is that good energy? And one description is when you allow your hand to move the way it does naturally move when you're not in hyper control. All right. Oh, I thought it was my wife. It's not. It's the kids getting home. All right. Thanks for joining me today. I appreciate it. Thank you, Michael. You're kind. And I will not be broadcasting tomorrow because tomorrow's a special day for my daughter. I now see that now that this is brighter, I realize everything around her needs to come up brighter. There's too much contrast there, right? But that's all part of the business. It is irritating me how long it is taking me to do 4 portraits. But better to get it done right than to rush and get it done wrong. All right. Bye-bye, y'all. Talk to you in a couple days. Bye-bye.